never slow up. No, I don't take shit, I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
The first part ended with 2 FBI agents arriving at Matthew Martoma's house. But when they came to indict him, instead of bringing up the stock issue as we expected, they told him, "We know what you did at Harvard." Now let's go into the second and final part of the story. Matthew Martoma's trump card. Matthew Martoma got accepted into Harvard. His father was so happy he was practically dancing, thrilled that he had guided his son there. Matthew studied very well in his first year, becoming the editor of the Law and Technology Journal. He also founded an Ethics and Law Association there. In his second semester, he applied for internships with several judges in different places. The email sending time was indeed the day before, but the recipient's reception time was different. Matthew, of course, stuck to his story until the end, saying there was probably a server delay that caused the email to arrive late. His family also testified in court, supporting and confirming his story. The secretary of one of these judges meticulously reviewed his documents and confirmed that yes, the email was indeed sent on the day the young man claimed. She noticed something suspicious in his transcripts. She then contacted the Harvard admissions office, and eventually the truth came out. He had tampered with his transcript. The real continuation of the story is that in the middle of this legal battle, Matthew partnered with his roommate and started a computer company. When he came to, the FBI agent told him, "We also know about that 2008 deal." When he said this, they both understood what it meant. Then he told him, "Your life will be turned upside down from this moment on. You will lose all your friends. Your children will hate you because you will spend years behind bars." Then he added, "If you cooperate, the government will not bother you. The government won't do anything to you because the one we're after is Steve Cohen. We just want you to cooperate." The evidence presented in court, which stated that the metadata was reviewed and the email was sent at that time, was actually produced by his own company. In other words, he brought his computer to his own company, meaning his actions were also a legal game. He admitted, "Yes, I forged the documents. I changed some things in them, then left them at home. An urgent matter came up, and I told my brother to send these documents to some of the judges. At that time, many people dropped out of university to start their own businesses, so it wasn't particularly unusual for him to do something similar. This company didn't last, and after it failed, he went to Stanford Business School. But for Martoma and his family, this incident was a disgrace. Therefore, they guarded it like a family secret, ensuring it wouldn't leak. We don't know if the hedge fund found out about this during their background check when they hired him, but it's possible they did and encouraged his hiring as a high-risk move. This precisely indicates that he's likely the kind of person they were looking for. It was shortly after this that he officially changed his name from Matthew to Martoma. He mistakenly sent some of the manipulated documents instead of the original ones. Matthew claimed he realized the mistake before the secretary did and emailed 2 of the secretaries, asking to withdraw his application and requesting them not to review his documents. 2 B's and a B+ had been changed to A's. He had left 2 other B's untouched to cover his tracks. Matthew initially claimed it was a joke and they were just playing around. However, they took the matter to higher university authorities, and the university's board of directors recommended that Matthew be expelled. He hired a lawyer and fought fiercely. He even took a polygraph test twice, maintaining his claim that he had tampered with the transcript, but not for forgery or official purposes. He did it to show his mother. The court also had reports confirming that his family had put immense pressure on him to succeed, achieve excellent grades, and advance. However, the court says otherwise. It states that the email was received 2 hours after the secretary who discovered the crime contacted Matthew. Then he gave his laptop to a computer company. They forensically examined the metadata of the emails, the Harvard decision, and its aftermath. Despite all this, Harvard decided he should be expelled. But the computer company he started during the dot-com bubble in early 2000 helped make his expulsion from Harvard seem less strange. A family secret, Rosemary says that Martoma told her this story early in their relationship. She says, "I'm an open person about everything. On the day they came to his house, he fainted. When he came to, the FBI agent told him, 'We also know about that 2008 deal.' When he said this, they both understood what it meant. Then he told him, 'Your life will be turned upside down from this moment on. You will lose all your friends. Your children will hate you because you will spend years behind bars.' Then he added, 'If you cooperate, the government will not bother you. The government won't do anything to you because the one we're after is Steve Cohen. We just want you to cooperate.' The ideal witness and the unexpected refusal. In response to the big question of why Martoma didn't sell out Cohen, many say he took money from him, that Cohen deposited money into a secret account in a country somewhere, and Martoma took the money and agreed not to speak. These were the people who advised him on whether or not to implicate Cohen. Of course, the final decision was his, but they advised him. They sent their bills and Cohen paid them. This is a point one should keep in mind. However, the author says, "I don't believe this, because even if he did it very carefully, Matthew was the 8th employee to face charges of insider trading using confidential information." In the midst of these cases, after they reached an agreement on the initial case we mentioned, news came out that Cohen had bought Picasso's The Dream for $155 million, making it the second most expensive painting in history. Shortly after, he bought a new beachfront house in East Hampton for $60 million. He and his family came to New York for the duration of the trial and stayed in a downtown hotel. This case is about fraud. Then Matthew's former colleagues testified one by one. Rosemary, whenever she agreed with someone, would smile. When she disliked their testimony, she would flare her nostrils. They say she wore very striking clothes on court days, and her entrance, hand in hand with her husband, to the courtroom was as if she was preparing to walk on a red carpet. He was an 81-year-old man, clearly suffering and frail. And during the 5 days he came to court to testify, he appeared very vulnerable, abandoned, and helpless. Many said that Martoma should not have let the case go to court. He should have settled because the evidence against him was such that he really had no chance. His parents also came from Florida, and they all sat in the front row of the courtroom wearing winter coats, scarves, and very formal attire. Rosemary's parents also sat next to her. Whether he testified against Cohen or not, the company was in a truly bad situation. And through several intermediaries, he's practically giving them the opportunity to question him forever. A few months later, another case was filed, this time against Cohen personally, on charges of mismanagement of subordinates. It claimed that Cohen received all the suspicious information that should have raised red flags for him and made him realize that illegal activities were happening within the company, but he took no action. This mismanagement case is still open. In the second week of the trial, Sid Gilman slowly walked to the witness stand. Gilman had been expelled from the University of Michigan, and his name had been removed from everywhere, from the hospital named after him, from the course named after him, and from the university website. His government funding had been cut. None of his former colleagues wanted to see him anymore. He had been completely banned from entering the university campus. Recently, they say he had started seeing patients and giving consultations at a free clinic. He said about this work, "I worked so hard for that university, and in the end, I left it in disgrace." Matthew is not considered an ideal witness. If Cohen's lawyers can minimize what you do, if they can make you do what you do, Cohen generally ignores these accusations. Once, a lawyer asked him about the legal clause that speaks against insider trading. He said, I don't even know what that law says." The lawyer replied, "Man, these are your own organizational procedures." He copied and repeated that law. He said, "I don't know what those procedures say either." The lawyer became upset and said, "Sir, you are the head of this company, and you're sitting there saying you don't even know what the most important law for which you've been persecuted so much says about your own procedures?" He said, "Yes, I read the procedures and all, but I really don't know what was in them. I don't remember." It's interesting that in the previous episode of Channel NARRA, which was the final part of the mastermind story, this very incident was mentioned. Later, he said, "I was ashamed. I had betrayed myself, my colleagues, the university, everyone. It was out of shame that I had thrown myself into a circle of lies, saying that I had not given confidential information." Finally, they told him, "Man, you're nothing in all of this. You're worthless. Just tell us and free yourself." They also promised him that if he told them everything he knew, he would not be prosecuted. But let's leave that aside. These things are unimportant because it was a big surprise that Martoma refused to cooperate and wouldn't testify against Steve Cohen. Let's leave Matthew here and hear a little from Dr. Sid Gilman. Matthew's lawyers, however, showed no signs of cooperation at any stage, even when told that if this young man went to court, his life would be ruined. They offered no guidance, such as, "Yes, we might be ready to cooperate." The police had approached him several times, asking if he had given confidential information to Martoma. He had consistently lied to them. The decision to cooperate. In such cases, if a party is willing to cooperate, their lawyer usually gives indications, for example, about what concessions their client might be willing to make in exchange for cooperation. In short, a team eventually came and handcuffed Matthew in front of his children, then took him away. Matthew's legal representation and Cohen's response. One point to consider here is that Matthew had very skilled and expensive lawyers in this case who were hired by the SAC company itself. After this case became public, Cohen held a general meeting for all employees and said, "I am disgusted by the behavior of a handful of you employees." In 2013, the company's lawyers had agreed to pay a $616 million fine to settle another related case. Another case against the company is that they attracted many financial market fraudsters and that Cohen is using confidential information to an extent that no other hedge fund has ever done. Cohen's lifestyle amidst legal troubles, he's also an interesting person. Martoma's trial, Matthew's trial, began in January 2014 and lasted a month. The government's lawyer began the session by saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not about scientific experiments, nor is it about stock trading. The key witness, Sid Gilman, in short, a few emails from Martoma to Cohen and his colleagues, and a few scattered testimonies from various individuals were presented until it was time for the main witness. In court, they say he came very well dressed and neat, with his tie knot tightly fastened. He was an 81-year-old man, clearly suffering and frail. And during the 5 days he came to court to testify, he appeared very vulnerable, abandoned, and helpless. Many said that Martoma should not have let the case go to court. He should have settled because the evidence against him was such that he really had no chance. The defense's strategy, however, in court, his defense team ruthlessly questioned Gilman's testimony and his credibility. Gilman had said that he emailed the presentation file to Martoma, but they repeatedly insisted that no one found any evidence or trace of this email. Sometimes Gilman genuinely seemed confused. They asked him about the population of the city he lived in, and he said 1,500 people. The core of the matter and Martoma's defense. The main point, however, is that they couldn't believe this man would squander his reputation, credibility, and everything else for a few $100,000, a man who truly didn't need the money. Martoma's lawyer said, "Matthew is a perfect example of American success. While Gilman is a confused and disoriented old man whom the government has put words in his mouth, this man is not in his right mind. He is in a trance. They say that when speaking with Gilman, Martoma's lawyers would raise their voices as if talking to a deaf person. Their tone also carried a hint of pity, as if their audience was a 7-year-old child. The lawyers said that the information Gilman provided was all publicly available and that there was nothing wrong with trying to gain an advantage. They also denied the government's claim that there was a special connection between the two, saying that Gilman talked and consulted with many other people. Gilman's character and Martoma's perspective. One of Gilman's colleagues described him as a naturally mentoring person, someone who loved to help and teach others. He also said, "I can easily imagine that if someone is eager enough, they could take advantage of this trait." Something that stood out most during Gilman's testimony was his loneliness. His son lived somewhere near the courthouse, but they hadn't spoken for years. When Gilman was asked what attracted him to Martoma, he said, "He was pleasant." Then he paused and added, "And unfortunately, I must say he reminded me of my first son in his curiosity and eagerness to learn and in the brightness of his mind. And sadly, my first son also had a brilliant mind and committed suicide." Because they couldn't prove anything about the content of that call. If Martoma had taken the stand, the prosecutor would have surely grilled him about the Harvard case. That's why his team's final decision was that Martoma would not testify in his own trial. Cohen was also not called to testify. He was interrogated once about that phone call, and the only thing he said was that Martoma told him in that conversation that he no longer felt comfortable with those shares, because their situation often makes it difficult to explain their plans clearly to each other. It's the same in mafia organizations. They have one term that means kill him and another that means don't kill him. When the verdict was read, Rosemary wept. His sentence was based not only on the $9.3 million bonus he received, but his name didn't even appear in the case as someone who was interrogated. The entire case was silent about Cohen, and even the judge asked the lawyers not to mention him at all because his name wasn't in the case. Cohen's position, of course, was consistent. He said, "I told my children that my subordinates betrayed each other. Some of the people in the company did bad things and should be held accountable for them. I did nothing wrong." He said that talking about him would lead the trial in a direction that was on the trial's path, but also on the SAC company's total profit of $275 million. Many times, you and I might not even be able to distinguish the difference, and the prosecutor truly cannot explain such a thing fairly or prove that the person was actually committing a certain crime here. If you don't know these codes, the surface of the conversation shows nothing. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse, comfortable camel-colored trousers, and a small golden cross around her neck. She said that Martoma was innocent and unwilling to confess to a crime he hadn't committed. Martoma's father had also told the author this outside the courtroom. Then she says that Martoma is now like him to her and he is paying the price, and so on. Rosemary says that the government's case is fundamentally a story. The SAC company's practice is to use available resources to develop a trading thesis, and that's what Martoma did. Now Gilman might have accidentally let slip a thing or two he shouldn't have, but these were irrelevant to the trades Martoma made. After Matthew left the room, they talked for 4 hours. Why would he have lied about giving confidential information to Martoma? She says it's because when he first faced the FBI, he lied to them, and then when they caught him, they accused him of obstructing justice, which is a crime itself. After that, they could put the words they wanted into his mouth so he would say what they wanted, so they wouldn't prosecute him. This story was also forced upon him. They confessed their own guilt, admitting they pressured him, saying, "We pressured him so much to be the best, to be excellent." The judge had ordered them to pay fines from all their various accounts, meaning all their savings would be taken and they still wouldn't reach the amount they owed the government. It became clear in the conversation that the money the author thought they had given to charity, they hadn't actually given. In all of 2011, they had only given a total of $1,000 to various charities, including a $210 check to the Alzheimer's Association. All the money they had in that charitable foundation would now go to the government. To get the highest grades, to be ahead of everyone, as his father says, I sometimes think in my dreams. Then they asked if he asked why he didn't feel comfortable, and he said, yes, I did ask, but I don't remember what he answered. The person deliberately didn't want to give any information. He never gives any information. The unspoken truth and the verdict. Something not addressed in court was the content of the 23-minute phone call between Martoma and Cohen on a Saturday morning after Martoma seeked to Michigan before they began selling shares. The second theory is that their two-person conversation was deliberately very vague and ambiguous. Cohen wasn't foolish enough to sit and listen to a subordinate explain an illegal act step by step. In many of these companies, a don't ask, don't tell policy prevails. When confidential information comes in, they don't exchange it with words. They convey it through tone of voice or even a coded language, like saying, my persuasion level is, for example, 9. This means the person fights to say, sir, I got this through a channel I shouldn't have, and the reliable news says, I confirm this to level 9, which is a true statement. Theories behind Martoma's refusal. We mentioned the first theory to explain why Martoma didn't sell out Cohen. This is not limited to just people. Individuals involved in criminal activities usually develop a precise semiotics among themselves. The verdict and its aftermath in this trial, the jury deliberated for 2 days and then found Martoma guilty on 2 counts of securities fraud and 1 count of criminal conspiracy. Despite this, Steve Cohen was not only not found guilty and not even interrogated in this case. Cohen's stance and family support. The person himself said that he believed Cohen conducted that transaction with confidential information that Martoma brought to him, but no mention of Cohen was made in that trial. During the trial, Martoma's family wrote 143 letters to the judge stating that he was innocent. A glimpse into Martoma's life after conviction music plays. He shook my hand with a welcoming smile and thanked me for coming, but said he didn't want to talk. Rosemary said, I'll speak for him. The family situation was dire. The government would likely confiscate their home. Rosemary's explanation and a family legacy. Rosemary's explanation for why Martoma didn't speak against Cohen was unlike either of the 2 theories we discussed. The author tells her that Gilman has lost everything and has nothing left to lose. Rosemary tells a story about her grandfather, who was a lawyer in India, fought alongside Gandhi, went to prison, and was harmed. Then she says that Martoma is now like him to her, and he is paying the price, and so on. Martoma's silence and Gilman's contradictions in the middle of the conversation. Martoma occasionally comes to the corner of the room, talks with Rosemary for a bit, and then leaves again. The author says, I'm a bit surprised. People who, after being convicted, still insist on their innocence are usually very eager to talk and tell their story. However, some parts of the story she told differed from what he heard in court and from other sources. For example, she said that a relative of theirs had actually died that weekend Martoma went to Michigan. She recounts how much he thought of her, saying that when she was on night shifts, he would stay at the hospital so she wouldn't be alone. She mentioned many letters the family wrote, saying that Matthew would always be a role model for them and how much they would love him. She says that this incident deeply pains all 4 of their parents. Martoma's mother said, I wish I could go to prison instead. Rosemary says, I say the same thing. Then he asks her, so, did he actually go to their house or not? She says, no, I don't think he remembers anything specific about going to their house. He came to the theory that Martoma isn't speaking against Cohen because doing so would question his innocence. And prohibitions, and this man is returning to the business of managing people's investments, managing the money of the wealthy, having a hedge fund. He said, "We only take action when we have enough evidence to convict, and in this case, we really didn't get there." Of course, as we said, Cohen now has two other cases, one for mismanagement and another for a complaint from former shareholders and those two pharmaceutical companies who claim they lost money by doing business with this company. Then he would have to confess to his own guilt. Said, the Channel NARRA podcast is produced by Ali Bandari with the help of Namlik. They will help you. ME, SoundCloud, or the Channel NARRA blog on WordPress to see what we've talked about before. You're sure to find something to your liking there. There are crime stories, political adventures, strange and unusual cases, and multi-part podcasts like the Mastermind series, which we told in 7 parts. All of them are true stories, and all of them have been published in reputable places. Some of them have won awards here and there. The film rights for some have been sold, and a film or series will be released from them soon or has already been released. And regarding the subjects of most of these episodes, even though their stories were very big, nothing specific has been written about them in Persian anywhere. Or, at least when I made the podcast, there wasn't much information available. With Namlik, creating a podcast is truly easy. Breivik, the Norwegian terrorist, appears in the news every now and then. El Chapo's fate is still uncertain whether he will remain with the Mexican government or be extradited to the U.S. Johar Tsarnaev is awaiting an appeal hearing that might overturn his death sentence. Richard Wersch and White Boy Rick are also in similar situations. This person hopes the governor will sign his extradition to Germany, and perhaps most interestingly, Paul, who still hasn't gone to court, and everyone is waiting to see where his case goes in the next few weeks. Most of our subjects are still alive. Their stories are not yet finished. If you enjoy listening to podcasts and are looking for good Persian podcasts, visit Namlik. We try to quickly translate and post any interesting news about any of Channel NARRA's old subjects on the blog with the help of our colleagues. As always, the biggest help you can give to Channel NARRA is to introduce it to others. You can also follow the blog posts with the Channel NARRA podcast identifier on Twitter, Facebook, or Channel NARRA's Telegram channel. In the past year, several good new podcasts have emerged, and you might enjoy listening to at least one of them. They include literary fiction podcasts, football podcasts, science podcasts, and cooking podcasts. Check them out. You'll probably find something interesting. Either he was an extremely ambitious person who wanted to understand his limitations from the beginning before taking action, or no, he had already decided to break the law for his personal gain and only wanted to learn how to protect himself when he got into trouble. Then the author says, if the latter is true, then I was fooled. None of the families have any savings to help them. Rosemary says that there has never been, is not, and will never be any talk of Cohen helping them. And she prays that America gives them the chance to survive and succeed. This man is willing to go to prison, away from his wife, children, and family, but not to break his image as an honorable person. That's why every time Rosemary left, he expected the young man to come out of the room in April 2014, SAC company was dissolved. It essentially became a small company that, according to Cohen's agreement with the government, is only allowed to manage Cohen's personal $9 billion capital. Cohen is now careful that from now on, he will be more vigilant that no one else engages in insider trading or violates regulations. He has also hired a security company from Silicon Valley to monitor his employees. They say he has even banned certain types of instant messaging in the company. He says that when he compared them, he saw that Gilman, who confessed, was released from prison, but no one cared about him, and he had no reputation left. She gave an answer, then took a breath, went to Martoma, and came back saying, I need to correct something I said. Martoma says that he was accepted to Harvard, He asks, "What happened?" She says he was accepted to Harvard College. He says, yes, he was. He himself decided to go to Duke because he thought it would be easier there, for example, in the South. He says, well, it was hard to believe that statement. The author says, she said other things that made me doubt whether she was telling the truth or not, and say, yes, sir, the FBI wrongly imprisoned me, and start talking himself. But he didn't come. Instead, Rosemary, at one point, spoke extensively about Gilman's dual personality. She said, he's a strange man. He sacrificed all his values to save himself. There was no special relationship between them. For example, at one point, Gilman had said, yes, I was influenced that time I went to meet Martoma. He had prepared lunch for me. And Rosemary turns to the author and says, for example, you came here today, we put sandwiches in the room for you. Were you influenced? The lunch Martoma gave to Gilman today was exactly like this. Rosemary's perspective and Martoma's Harvard story, the author says he found Rosemary to be sharp and intelligent in this conversation. At another point, the author says he asked her if Martoma thought his acceptance to Harvard University compensated for his rejection from Harvard College, which had disappointed his father, meaning that justice was served. But after a lot of conversation, the conclusion he reached was that Rosemary deeply and sincerely believes in her husband. The author's conclusion, the author says that after hearing all this, and after seeing that all the relatives and family unanimously believe that this man is going to prison for a crime he didn't commit, then he compares him to Gilman and the image of Gilman in the courtroom, alone, without friends, family, or acquaintances, confessing his guilt and crime, while the front rows of the courtroom are filled with Martoma's loved ones. The children are now 9, 7, and 5 years old. They understand that their father is going to prison. The family, of course, has no savings. The fate of SAC and Cohen's future, now that Cohen has been mentioned, let's quickly touch on the end of the story. However, recently, there have been talks again about the expiration or lifting of Cohen's restrictions. The lingering questions and future outlook, the author says he asked the police. You spent all this money, and in the end, you couldn't trap Cohen? A former professor of Martoma's at the university, regarding what happens to this man's initial interest in ethics, medical ethics, bioethics, etc. Rosemary's hopes and a call to action, he asks Rosemary about the future, and she breaks down crying, saying she doesn't know, but her goal is to find the answer to that very question. Music plays. What you just heard was the second and final part of the Trump card story, the 13th story we told on the Channel NARRA podcast. If you want a specific type of podcast and don't find it there, you can come up with an idea yourself, then send an email to NAMLIC. If this is your first time listening to Channel NARRA, visit our page on NAMLIC. Many of the stories we've told here are not yet finished. After telling these stories, we continue to follow them. We carefully monitor the news daily. Channel NARRA podcast music plays.